that. So welcome. If you're just joining, special welcome. Let's get into it. I just want to start with the premise that psychology is defined as the study of the mental processes. So it's really about studying how the mind works, right? And the mind is eventually shaped by nature and nurture. We've been talking about that. And the impact of that is that nature dictates, you know, the biological forms. You know that. You could also throw that in the chat. We like to see you throw things in the chat. So, you know, what nature is, what you understand nurture to be, throw those things out, because those are the things that together form the general makeup of how the mind eventually works, right? So if this is your first time, and maybe if you're a repeater or you've been here, throw it out in the chat. I like to see what you say. What do you understand nature to mean, and what do you know nurture to be? What does it sound like to you, right? Throw it out there. Let's talk. Let's get it going. So I want to remind you that it remains debatable as to which has the greater impact on our lives, right? Whatever we believe is sometimes beside the point. When we hit some debilitating conditions in our lives, in those moments, it doesn't matter if you felt that it's how you were born or how you were raised. The truth is, when you hit those places in life, what really matters is what you're feeling in the moment. In that all-time low, there is a real war that is taking place in our mental faculties. So there's a battle that's going on in our minds, right? We go to church with the battles. We come home from church with the battles. We go to prayer meeting and fastings, and sometimes for a day we get a reprieve, but we're still experiencing these things. Whether you believe it's nature or by nurture that things affect you in life and which one has the greater impact, that really, at the end of the day, when you get to those low places, it doesn't matter. You're just feeling a lot of emotion and you really want some help in the moment, some means of getting over. And that's what's important. So sometimes I have friends and associates who might, you know, in the midst of something maybe really challenging, a tough period, they may call me, send me a text, I'm going through this, can you please help me through this? Now, it's almost impossible to just hear one story or one little text, and even as a psychotherapist, for me to assess a mental health crisis and make a diagnosis. In that moment, it is impossible to do that, right? We need a kind of context as professionals. Any healthcare professional will need that. Even if you go to the doctor, they don't just hear one thing you say and diagnose and give you a prescription. That is not usually likely the case unless they already have a history on you. So it's important that we take what is called a careful assessment of each person's unique circumstance before we get to moving to solutions. So therapy is not, first of all, just solution. It is understanding why someone is doing something. Why is it happening now? Why does it continue? What supports do you have? How can we help you to solve this? All of that before solution. So this is what we called, in my substantive role as a psychotherapist, a formulation. We create a formulation for the clients, and we look at things like these, presenting concerns, things that predispose you, and why they're happening, why they continue, and what strengths and resources and supports do you have to rely on. So in light of that, we evaluate what's going on with someone. Why are you predisposed? So for example, if you have high blood pressure, diabetes, whatever, the doctor is going to ask about your family connection. Is there anybody in your family with this? Is there a history? Whose side? All these things. You're gathering information. We have to do that as well. Gather the information and understand it, because the biosocial factors are very important to understanding why you are experiencing certain things at this time in your life. Now, these biosocial factors will impact you in the mental health area, your emotional, your physical. It affects your whole psychological being, right? So let's look, for example, we're talking about biosocial, the genetic piece with how you were raised, that combined force of DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, likes to call it the biosocial. Some people say the biogenic conditions. Now, there are developmental issues that you might have been born into and or raised into. So parental mental health at the time, right? Was mom going through depression? Is dad maybe having whatever kinds of depression or mood disorders, or are there personality disorders in the family? What runs in the lineage? Were these people on certain substances, drinking too much during pregnancy, smoking? Was this baby exposed to these things? Doing crack cocaine, dysfunctional environment, lots of fights and battles and toxic situation, arguments, constant fightings and arguments, miserable situations. Remember that the babies in the womb, the babies, the young are adapting to these emotions. And even when children are born, they're born in these environments, and there's a history of violence and in the home. And once they're exposed, these things are forming nurture. So, you know, they're already in nature in the genetic piece, and now they're forming nurture in what they come in and the environment in which, as kids, we are raised, right? Or how we raise our children. Now, all these things will impact three main things. And it's how we react to things. Some people are born with high reactivity. High. The minute someone says something, you react so fast and so high. It's like you move from 0 to 110 in 0 seconds. And you're like, I didn't expect, I don't get why they're so upset. It's not just that. It's not just what's said in the moment. It's that you're already predisposed. Then there are others who are born with high sensitivity. Oh, they're touchy. It's like the Teslas, or I don't know, maybe those expensive Lamborghini, those vehicles that are considered to be all these electronically wired, and they're sensitive, right? They're not like the four-wheel drive, tough terrain, mountain vehicles that just go over rugged areas. So, but they all serve their purposes. So you have the sensitive vehicles that are good for the lovely highways, and they're perfect for the summer, you know, and your sunroof is down, and they serve their purposes. But yet when you're going into your hike and the mountainous areas or long trips with bad roads, you want those tough four-wheel drive vehicle that can go into the rugged, right? So every single person, whether you have your high reactivity or your high sensitivity, it doesn't mean that you serve no purpose. There is a purpose for you. It's just to be able to know yourself, to harness those, and to use them appropriately in the moment, right? And that's what we want to find. And so depending on whether you have a high reactivity or that high sensitivity where you're touchy and thin-skinned and everything upsets you, maybe it will affect how you get back to your baseline. So picture this. If you like, those of you who are from the country like I am, where we put fire, make fire out, whether we were using wood fire or you're making fire at the bushes with your, we call it ground with grandparents and whoever. What you find is that if you put bamboos together and you light that, bamboos blow up quick, they catch quickly, they blow up and they're done. But when you put those logwood wood pieces together, right? You have that coal that goes on for so long, it's burning. Yeah, the wood is firm and solid and it's burning, and it takes a long time to put out. Sometimes we had to pour water on that fire. Sometimes the coals lay dormant, but they're still hot. And in the morning, you could put back fresh wood on it and you catch a new fire without lighting it afresh. That's in a way how our emotions work with some people. You get upset quickly, and like bamboo, you blow up, you tell people off, you give them that piece of your mind, and you're done. You're done. You get it off, and you're good. You see them the next morning, and you tell them the brightest morning like nothing happened, and you really mean nothing happened because you've moved on. And then there are those of us, like the logwood wood. So we're so sensitive, we go up, and I think about it, and I tell you off, and then, okay, I feel better, so I come down a little bit. And then when I think about it for 5 more minutes, I say, you know, so them really rude and rank out. So I go up again, and I'm upset. and I vex, and somebody come and say, all right, man, just let it go, and you feel good and say, you know what, you're right, they're not worth my peace. Okay? We come down and it's Sunday and church is beautiful and nice. And as soon as we're done church, you think about the word and the word hurt you, it hurt you for those who are not Jamaican. And you realize that, no, this really boiling in me. And you vex again, 100, you pass where you were. And 5 years later, you still vex. 20 years later, you still vex about the same issue. Having difficulty coming back down to what we call baseline. Now, baseline is knowing where your level is when you're at peace, when you operate at peace. And some people's baseline is this high. Others, you can't even see it. It's like a dry riverbed. But some people's baseline, if 10 is the best, maybe their baseline is 8, while your baseline is 1 or 0. Like everything is good. It's copacetic. I'm perfect. I'm fine. Some people's baseline will always be high because they've never been able to come down to the lowest point. All these things are from our biosocial factors. What you inherit in genes, plus how you were raised. Maybe you were raised in an environment where people just have up people, where people never let things go, where people never learn to forgive. You've not seen forgiveness. You've never experienced it. You were not forgiven. You were not forgiven. You were reminded all the times about the one mistake that you made at 9 or at 14. And so that forms your baseline, and you don't know how to forgive others. So your baseline is that, okay, I won't talk about it, but I'll always remember it. So I'm operating at 8 and 9 out of 10. We're predisposed to high reactivity, high sensitivity, low baseline, low, slow return to our baseline. And so those people who cannot get down fast enough to a baseline are the people who overthink. Your minds are always racing. You can't calm down. You're always overthinking. We call that in psychotherapy rumination. It's like a cow chewing. You're just it's like a gum, having a gum in your mouth, and you keep chewing. Even when the juice is done, you keep chewing and chewing. When the mint is gone, you keep chewing. It is rumination. You never let go from it. Now, picture what this environment must have looked like for this person. An invalidating environment. This environment is one in which you're pervasively being told something negative, or it's acted against you in some way. So maybe you're always ignored. Maybe you were raised to be put down a lot, rejected all the time, or made to feel like you were a mistake. Always corrected. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter how right you get the rice. It's not good enough. It doesn't matter how perfect the dumplings are. They're either too big or too small. It doesn't matter how lovely you made that cup of drink. It's either too sour or too sweet. You can't get it right. And so you are raised in that pervasively invalidating environment. Everything you do, you're undermined. You're always told this is not done well enough. The floor is not clean enough. It's not swept well. The bed is not made well. And pervasively, you begin to accept that I can never get it right. I will never get it right. I am never good enough. I am not enough. I just don't fit in. Why can't I get it right? Is something wrong with me? It's not you. It's that you're raised in a pervasively invalidating environment. And so that's all you know. And one that punishes you too. Every time they think you don't get it right, you're punished for it. And punishment could mean physical abuse, or punishment could mean just what you're being told, verbal abuse. Now, why is it that right now you're spiraling? Why is it that you can't find peace? Why are you spiraling so much? Because you have that vulnerability of how you were predisposed, and now you're probably experiencing feelings of rejection, maybe in your relationship, in your marriage, in your partnership with whoever it is, whether at work or with the person you're seeing, or in your relationship with your best friend. Maybe right now you're experiencing humiliation. Somebody said something that is meant to humiliate you or bully you. And so you are already vulnerable, and this current moment now exacerbate in such a way your vulnerabilities. And so now you're heightened. So you were already at 8. So you're choking over here. You can barely see with everything you're experiencing. Maybe shame. Maybe it's what you feel. Maybe it's just vengefulness from someone. Or maybe you're experiencing some physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, or just abuse. Maybe it's family history. Sometimes that's why things happen now. Maybe there's a family history of suicide or suicide attempts or suicidal ideation. And you find yourself and you begin to think, how am I as a believer wanting to kill myself? Why am I thinking about suicide? Why do I wish to die? And you feel badly because you can't testify about that. That's not a testimony. You're going to be looked down on if you talk about those things. You can't talk to anyone about it because you don't have enough faith. How could you have faith and be saved if you feel like killing yourself, or if you're thinking like that? So all of that now adds that weight, add to everything you already are. Remember, you're the sensitive person because you're predisposed that way, and you haven't worked through it. So you're still sensitive, even though you're 30, 40, 50, 60, you really didn't work on the high sensitivity. So you still have it. You didn't work on the high reactivity. So you're still losing you and telling everybody a piece of your mind. And even though you're safe for 40 years, why do you still cuss people out? You haven't worked on the high reactivity. You were predisposed, you were raising it, and you haven't worked on it. You haven't done any work on that traumatic impact on you. And so you tell everybody a piece of your mind still, 50 years later. Maybe you're experiencing right now divorce, separation in the home, struggles with children, struggles with parents, maybe relocation, maybe thinking of going to a new school, maybe you've moved to a new city, a new job, whatever it is. Maybe you have poor physical health. Maybe there's a breakup with a boyfriend or girlfriend or partner. All these things, maybe there's a learning problem. You just learned that, right? So maybe it's some, I don't know, migration. Maybe you have moved to someplace else, a new country, and you can't even adapt to that culture. And everything is weighing on you right now. And that plus what you inherited in the environment that you were raised in and what you were born with, all those coupled together. What do you think is going to happen? It's going to form a hot chaos and mess unless you put it in check, unless you stop to own it and to work on it. Remember, we are talking about situations that you probably have not worked on. So you were predisposed, and this is why it's happening now, because there are new, tough, struggling, challenging situations that's adding to what you already have. So why is it continuing? Well, you know what, I knew that 5 years ago, but it still continues. Or 3 years ago, I did some therapy on it, or I spoke to my pastor, or I spoke to whoever. Why is it still continuing? Well, maybe you're at a place where you're experiencing some mental health challenge. So lots have changed in COVID. You've developed sadness, depression, anxiety, fear, anger. Sometimes we don't even know at who or what, why we're angry. We're just angry at everything and everyone and the whole world, and the world has done us wrong. And or maybe church hurt. That too. A lot of people are angry because they've experienced so much hurt within the church. And who do you work that out with? Because if you bring that, somebody would say you bring that to someone who's not in the church, unsaved, not in the context, they don't get it. And if you bring it to someone in the church, then they may tell someone else or bring it back to those people or condemn you. And so you find yourself in a place of almost like no help, no escape. You feel stuck and you feel helpless, a sense of hopelessness. And so you begin to think, how will my life ever change? Maybe you're experiencing tension right now in COVID. You've been stuck at your parents' place for the last 4 months, or stuck with a partner because you had to come back home from wherever and you don't feel very happy in that context. And right now you feel there's a lot of tension and aggression between you and these people. Maybe you're where you are right now because you've lost someone. It's a loss of a loved one, or whether through friendship or death or relationship. And you find yourself at this point and you think, I was there 5 years ago, why am I still there? Well, there are still vulnerable situations continuing in your life, and they will stir up. They will always stir up all those things that are latent in you, right? And you have to get to that place where you recognize them and understand why you are reacting right now. Because everyone has vulnerabilities. Everybody gets to a low point. Somebody loses their job, somebody loses a relationship, somebody's marriage breaks down, somebody's kid goes astray, somebody gets fired, somebody did not get the promotion, somebody's betrayed at work. All these things happen every day to someone, to others. How you respond says a lot about your baseline, because it's okay to experience these things for a while, but when they continue for extended periods of time, then we need to look on working on them. Maybe you really need to address the thing that you thought you did not need any help with. Maybe you need to get some counseling for that. Maybe you need to seek some in-depth therapy for that. Maybe you just need to own it in yourself. Maybe you just need to become vulnerable for once and stop being perfect. Maybe if you stop being perfect for a little bit, because perfectionism has also been such a strong cause of so many things that people experience and have not been able to come back to baseline because it's not working. It's not working. How can I be so perfect and have all these problems? Well, maybe if you own that you are perfectly imperfect, that's the place to start your healing. And so let's look at this battle for our minds in light of how we see this. And I said that to you before. So in my role as a psychotherapist, I would look at the presenting concerns for a client. What are they predisposed to? Why is this happening right now? Why is it continuing? And what are the supports that they have? What are the strengths that they have that we can build on? Let's look at scripture looking at these same things. Let's look at some problem situations in scripture. So throughout the Bible, there are a number of influential men that we quote today, men and women of faith who struggled with what we now call mental health issues. Yeah, we call it mental health today. They were not diagnosed as such, but they had all the symptoms. And if I were to see guys like David and Elijah and these guys, I would have diagnosed them with the same. I would have called that out. Look at David in Psalm 42. Why art thou cast down, O my soul? Why art thou disquieted within me? Hope thou in God. This is sadness and depression. The guy was sad. He says in Psalm 38, for my guilt, he was also suffering from guilt. My guilt has overwhelmed me like a burden, too heavy to bear. But we quote these guys, right? David experienced guilt. He experienced sadness. He experienced depression. And there's so many more. But Elijah, look at Elijah. Elijah was tired. So he was suffering from fatigue, burnout. He was afraid and he was discouraged. He went into depression. In 1 Kings 19:4, he said, I have had enough, Lord. Take my life. I am not better than my ancestors. Now, when people say, take my life, or I want to take my life, or I wish somebody would take my life, or I want to die, that's what we call suicidal ideation today. Elijah had it, the great prophet that did so many miracles. He had mental health issues. He had emotional issues. Maybe we want to go emotional issues because mental health is so strong and we don't like to connect that in the context of Christendom and the church. But he had these issues. Jonah had anger issues. He was angry at himself. He was angry at God. So if you're angry at yourself and angry at God, you're not the first. And I promise you, you're not the last. So look at Jonah. When I worked in forensic, we used to call what is AWOL means that you know, when we had youth who would be away without leave. And so they AWOL. So if they left a residence or escaped from some places, we said that they AWOLed. Jonah was the prime example of someone who AWOLed. And he developed suicidal thoughts while running away. He said, "No, O Lord," in chapter 4, verse 3, "take my life." Sorry, in verse 9 of chapter 1, of chapter 4, "take my life, for it is better for me to die than to live." And he says, "I'm angry enough to die." Chapter 4, verse 3 in Jonah. So, problem situation. Job was grief stricken. Job was devastated. Job was physically ill. So he had a medical issue that was causing him to be very vulnerable. And so the guy was grief stricken. He lost his family. He lost everything he had, his possession. And even his wife was threatened to leave because of how she was speaking to him. He said, "Why did I not perish at birth and die as I came from the womb?" In Job 3 and verse 11. He basically was saying to God, "I wish I had died at birth." That's what Job was saying. He says, "I have no peace, no quietness. I have no rest, only turmoil." In chapter 3, verse 26. That's a guy who was devastated, grief-stricken, had no peace. You know what he said in chapter 10, verse 1? We talked about that last week. Self-love versus self-hate. Self-hate. Job said, "I loathe my very life." Self-loathing means self-hate. I hate my very life. Therefore, I will give free rein to my complaint and speak out in the bitterness of my soul. I'm going to say anything I want to say to you because I'm mad. I'm angry. I'm upset. I'm hurt. I've lost. I'm grief-stricken. I'm devastated. These are guys in the scriptures. Mental health issues. Moses. Do we want to talk anger? Moses was angry. And he had all reason to be angry. The guy had attachment issues. He was separated from his mother, thrown in the Nile, picked up, raised again by the mother, separated to be raised again by Pharaoh's daughter. The guy had every reason to be angry. He said in Exodus 32 and verse 32, "But now please forgive their sin. But if not, blot me out of the book that you have written. I don't even want to be a part of what you have for me, God, if you will not forgive these people." He was so angry at God. This wasn't the first time. Moses himself told God that you're sending me up with these people, and who's going to go with us? The Lord said, "I'm too angry with them. I'm not going." Moses said, "Well, listen, if you're not going, I am not going, because these are your people. I'm not going up with them. So your hands off it, my hands off it. So both of us hands off it." And God changed his mind and went up. He was angry at God. Jeremiah, the weeping prophet. Jeremiah was despaired. Jeremiah felt like a failure. He said in chapter 20, verses 14 and 18, "Cursed be the day that I was born." My God, why did I ever come out of the womb to see trouble and sorrow and to end my days in shame? This is a guy filled with despair and hopelessness. But these are prophets and these are guys that we've quoted, and Psalmist David, and we can talk all we want about them, but how about Jesus? Jesus himself said in Mark 14:34-36, "My soul is deeply grieved to the point of death." His emotion had overtaken him. He said, "Remain here and keep watch." He was overtaken by the pain, his fear, his anxiety, and his soul was deeply grieved. He owned his emotions. He said, "Father, I'm afraid, if it be possible, take this cup from me." So why are we so afraid in Christendom, in church, to own our emotions? We are made to just walk and talk about, "I'm too blessed to be stressed. I'm so highly favored." Yes, we know our God, but it is okay to own your emotions. You are not your emotions. Emotions are feelings. They come, they go. Today, it's okay to say, you know what? I feel down in the dumps and I need prayer. If you're always so blessed, I don't know that I can support you because you're too blessed to be stressed. But if you feel like an Elijah or like a Jesus who sought help, then somebody will know to come along and to help you. But let's look at the predisposition that every believer has. Why me? We ask God that, why me? Jeremiah gives comfort in that word in chapter 1, verse 5. He says, before you formed me, you knew me. So the Lord knew. We wish we could have picked our parents. Yeah, we wish we could have chosen some of the situations that in which we were raised, some of the homes and the families. And, you know, we would love to have this perfect upbringing and ancestry and related to people who have clout and influence and connections and are perfect. But we didn't get to choose. Jeremiah said, though I didn't get to choose before you formed me, you knew me. David himself penned it perfectly in Psalm 139. He says, where can I hide from your presence, O God? If I make my bed in hell, there you will find me. If I take the wings of the morning, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. And he also says that all the days of my life, in verse 16, are spread out before me even before I had lived one day. Wow, that blew my mind when I read that verse. Every single day of my life was spread out before me before I had the chance to live one day. So God's not in shock or surprise about your emotions, and that today you're so down in the dumps that you didn't even want to get out of bed. It's okay. He knew that. And he knew that you would come to this point. But now it's to understand that he says in John 15:16 that he has chosen us and ordained us and that we did not choose him. So why now? What is his intent for us? Why do you experience this? Why is he allowing this? Why is this continuing? Paul says in Romans 8:28, all things, not some, not the ones you choose to have, all things work together for good to them that love the Lord and are the called according to his purpose. So if God has a purpose for you, you're going to have to go through some things. For the lesson in those things will be useful for the journey for which he's called you. Paul also writes in 2 Corinthians 10, verse 5, so we are able to cast down imaginations, every thought, every guilty thought, every angry thought, every emotionally high thought, every high reactivity and sensitivity. We are able to cast them down, every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God. And we're able to bring into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. Therefore, Philippians 2:5, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, that of peace, that of accepting and moving towards living aright and aligning ourselves in rhythm with the purpose of God for our lives. It's not the circumstance, it's how you view the circumstance, it's what you think about the circumstance. I've been telling you that it's your thought that drives the emotion. So how you think about it. So what is God's plan for us? Even while we continue in this, we continue to hope. Jeremiah 29:11 says it. A lot of you want, maybe this is your favorite verse. For I know the plans I have for you, said the Lord. Plans of peace and not of evil. Plans to give you hope and an expected end. So God knows. He already knows. Do you know? Do you know? Right? Even though you don't know where this is going to go, do you understand that God has a plan for your life? And for every crossroad that you get to, he will turn it around for your good. Joseph looked at his brothers and he said it, well, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. Paul writes it as well in Philippians 4:6-7. He says, be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts. Yes, the seat of emotions, the hearts, that's in the frontal cortex. It will guard your hearts and your mind in Christ Jesus. It's not the heart that pumps the blood. You look at this. It is a seat of emotions, the heart, which is in the frontal cortex. That is what he guides, that you will be able to think aright. What are God's promises to us? What's the support that you have? So you're feeling down and a lot going on. And yes, you may be so undeserving, but those are uncontrollable situations. What do you do when the world throws the bus at you? What do you do when the world betrays you? What do you do when everything you've worked for and thought that you had, that they just move from beneath you like nothing? What do you do? Those are uncontrollable circumstances. If you can solve it, go ahead and solve it. But if you can't solve these situations, maybe you want to accept. And maybe the serenity prayer is what becomes so consoling. May God grant you the serenity to accept the things you cannot change, courage to change the things you can, and the wisdom to know the difference. You cannot change anyone. You cannot change some circumstances in your life. When you cannot do it, let it go. Take your hands off it and let it go. Let the peace of God direct you and keep you, because we have the promise of God. What's God promised to us? Isaiah 55:11 says, so this is my word that goes out from my mouth. It will not return to me empty, but will accomplish what I desire and achieve the purpose for which I sent it. That's God's plan for you. That's God's word over you. So despite what's going on right now, stay in the ship. And maybe you're like Jonah that need to jump over the ship, because sometimes we have to jump over. But if God says you are to stay in the ship, that's your word. And if like Jonah, you're to be thrown overboard, that's your word. You got to know the word of God in your life. And when he speaks that word, he says, everything that I have spoken to you cannot return to me. Not void. It must accomplish what I desire in your life. So God has not forsaken you. He sees you, he knows you, and his word over you will remain. 2 Corinthians 1:20 says, and it sums it up perfectly, for all the promises of God in him are yes, and in him, amen, to the glory of God through us. And so, if God says it, it settles it. For Paul says it again in 2 Corinthians 12:9 this time, his grace is sufficient to keep us. So if he has allowed this path for you, he tells us in Isaiah as well, I think it's chapter 56, he says that he will restore, actually 61, he will give you double for your trouble. If God has spoken a word to you, despite the storm, the emotional storm, the turmoil, the mental disarray and challenges that you are experiencing, hold on to the word of God, because he's going to bring it to pass in your life. Don't lose sleep over it. Don't ruminate over it. Don't lose your peace over it. He knows you are experiencing it. He just wants you to own that emotion, stay in that ship with him, and watch God bring it to pass and give you a grace, a grace, a grace. He moves you from grace to grace. He will give you grace sufficient for your journey. So you don't need to be embarrassed today, ashamed to own that, you know what? Today I feel down in spirit. Or today I feel so sad. Or today I wish I wasn't alive. It's important that you own the emotion. And when you own it, just let it pass. Just let it flow through your system and recognize I am not my emotion. I feel this. It doesn't make it a fact. I feel it because of what I think about it. So I told you already some weeks ago, reframe your thinking, shift your thinking. When your troubles come, say this has got to be a promotion. This has got to be a blessing. This has got to be for the greater good. Or I can't wait to see what God's going to do with this. When you reframe it, then what it does is that even though it's real and you feel sad and you feel down, you do not continue to ruminate and lose sleep and get depressed and your pressure gone up and you're gone into all kinds of days and losing your nerves because you keep overthinking what's happened to you. God has not forsaken you. Own your struggles. Own your this phase in your life. And remember, it's a season. And seasons are temporary. They pass. That's how emotions are. They pass. They come, they go like the waves on the ocean, like a conveyor belt, like checking in your bag in the airport and you watch it going and somebody else's bag is and it's gone. That's emotions. They're real, but they're not facts. They're real what you feel and we want to validate that. But it doesn't mean that that is the truth concerning your life. It is the word of God that must take prominence and precedence in your life. Questions, comments, shoot at me.